Thank you. I should say, first of all, this is my first presentation in about 3 years, so no heckling, and I am looking at you, Copeland. Right. IRUS, actually, we call it IRUS-UK. We're funded for the last year and the next year by JISC, and we're in transition from project to full-blown service. Hopefully, fingers crossed, one day even a JISC core service. The folks behind IRUS-UK, actually the same team as the folks behind JUSP that many of you will have heard of, and that's Mimus, evidence base at Birmingham City University and Cranfield University, that's me. IRUS was actually born out of the PIRUS 2 project. This is where we were looking at consolidating usage of journal articles wherever they're hosted, whether on a publisher website or within an institutional repository. And the aim was, under a counter banner, to develop a global standard for counting at the article level and how you would consolidate counts across different sites. That was really quite successful. One of the outcomes from that is the Counter Release 1 Code of Practice for Articles that was released this year. And technically we showed it was feasible, but there was a bit of a problem that politically publishers weren't that keen on it. I think on the one hand because they're arguing that institutional repositories are sort of noddy little things that don't matter, and on the other hand they were probably worried that there was too much usage of journal articles from repositories. So we actually dropped the P and just left ourselves with IRUS, and that's what led via a glass of red wine on a Friday night to IRUS-UK, which is the Institutional Repository Usage Statistics UK. Quite simply, we want to enable repositories in the UK to share and expose statistics produced on the same basis as publishers, under the counter standard. Our aims and objectives, well, quite simply, we aim to collect raw download data from repositories for all item types. And I emphasise at this point that does include theses and dissertations, ETDs, because I'm not actually going to explicitly mention them for the next few slides. So just bear in mind they're included. Also important to note, we're interested in downloads, not abstract views, not record, landing page views. It's actual downloads of content, of research materials and so on. We take those raw data and we process them into counter compliance statistics, which can then be returned to the originating repositories and some more to do what they like with. In addition to that being really the core function is to provide that service to repositories. Of course, we also can provide a sort of national view of what's going on in repositories and give JISC and others a wider picture of what's happening in UK repositories. A lot of money has gone into them, with precious little evidence of their worth and value in terms of use of items that end up in repositories. And I think, as you'll see in a little while, we can demonstrate their value and place in the dissemination of scholarly outputs. Clearly, if we're collecting from multiple repositories, there are opportunities for benchmarking, profiling and reporting across, and slicing and dicing and showing various views of the data that we've processed. Also, for the likes of Open Air, we're and possibly Ethos, and we'll keep our fingers crossed there. We're a nice single agency to work with. Instead of someone like Open Air or Ethos, certainly to do with statistics, having to work with 150 separate repositories, they can talk just to us, and we can act as an intermediary, a channel, a single point of contact on behalf of UK repositories. The way we collect the data is ridiculously simple. Someone downloads a file from a repository, the repository server just fires off a message to our server, which we store in a log, and that's it. This is accomplished by, it's really a very small code change is required to repository software just to make it say, okay, a download's happened, fire off a message to IRUS. And we do this using something that, we kind of invented as part of PIRUS called the tracker protocol. the URL of that is there. All that does is it just sends a sort of, well, we claim it's an open URL key value string. It's an open URL-like key value string that it just sort of pushes to our server. To make life easy, we've actually got patches and plugins for DSpace and ePrints. Obvious targets because they account for 2/3 of the repositories in the UK. There are other softwares out there, Fedora. Fedora, though, is not a sort of out-of-the-box thing, so the best we can do is provide implementation guidelines and suggestions on how Fedora repositories might do it. There are also, of course, the new boys in town, Converus and Atira Pure and all of those with their sort of portal offerings as well. And we're talking to them, trying to get them to add our functionality to their softwares. Pure has been a bit of a challenge, but we hope, they keep coming back and saying, no, there's not enough interest, despite the fact we've got well over half a dozen repositories running Pure portal that do want to join. One day we'll see. Although not strictly in scope of IRUS-UK, it is just worth mentioning in passing that in addition to IRUS-UK, I'm developing 2 additional services already. An IRUS OAPEN, which is the OAPEN library hosted in the Netherlands, which is open access ebooks. We're providing a service with counter-stats for them. Also Core, based at the Open University, that aggregate from repositories around the world and have something like 20 million, I think it's 20 million articles that they host now. So we're also providing a similar service to them. Point being, neither of those are running in DSpace or ePrints, and both OAPEN and Core were able to implement the tracker. I think development time in each case was probably somewhere in the region of half a day. So it really is simple to get going and to join us. Just for a bit of fun, in case there's anybody vaguely interested and technically minded, there's kind of what one of these messages looks like that we receive. Key features, the IP address at the top, that's the IP address of the repository that sent the message to us. And then it's just a few key little bits that tell us what the file was that was downloaded, when it was downloaded, the IP address of the client, the user agent of the client that was accessing it, and so on. And from that, that's really all we need to get us going to convert raw data into counter stats. So we accumulate logs on a daily basis, and I process them mostly on a daily basis. In fact, I haven't done any database updates now for a week and a half because the Mimus is transitioning from physical servers in Manchester out into the cloud. So at the moment, ingest is frozen until we complete our transition. But anyway, when I do the daily update, it's just a series of Perl scripts. We strip out known robots following a counter robots list to exclude. That's the ones like Google, MSN Bot, and a range of other good robots that identify themselves. We take out some additional robots that Counter hadn't got in their list and that we've found through examining our data. And then we look a bit more closely, actually, at the individual entries and look for patterns because there's a lot of strange behaviour out there. I'll come back to this. Having removed everything that we think is probably non-human accesses, we then sort and filter entries, follow the counter rules according to the counter code of practice, consolidate the accesses for each item, update the database with the stats. First time an item is downloaded, of course, we know nothing about it at all, so at that point we go back to the repository it came from, harvest the metadata for it, stick it in our database, and then we know and we don't have to go back and ask about it again. I'm making you happy, John. All right, the key point is we apply the counter code of practice to filter out robots and double clicks. However, I've alluded to this. It is good, it's a good list. It gets rid of a lot of non-human usage, but of course repositories are an open access environment, and of course publishers themselves are increasingly now moving into an open access environment. And in the OA world, that counter list is simply not good enough as it stands. There are bad robots out there that, I don't mean they're evil, I mean they're behaving robotically, but they haven't identified themselves nicely in the same way that Google will announce, I'm Googlebot, I'm MSN bot, I'm doing some stuff indexing you. There's other ones out there that sort of do it covertly and look as though they're desktop machines, so you want to get rid of those. And then even worse, there's, I've got several sort of descriptions of them, but I'm not going to sort of say them here because it's more sort of bar talk. But it involves spammers, hackers, dictionary attackers, gamers, losers, and a whole range of weird people who've just got nothing better to do. That they will hit things, and actually they do quite like theses and dissertations for some reason. In other words, we need a more sophisticated system, or Counter needs a better system now that it's counting things that are in the open access world instead of behind a subscription barrier. So, to start to address this, last year we commissioned a consultancy firm which involves Hazel Woodward, Helen Henderson, you probably know the names, and Chris Leamy, to look at the raw data we'd been collecting. The idea being to test the feasibility of some kind of dynamic algorithm that is going to detect out of the ordinary usage and enable us to exclude it, following a set of clearly defined rules that could be applied by any and all. A report on that initial work is available from our IRUS news page. It's worth a read if any of you are sort of geeky enough to be interested in this area. But I think the key thing is you can't just look at a day's worth of data and say this is suspicious or not. You can't even really just look at a month's worth. In truth, you probably have to look both at a day's worth and a month's worth, and maybe even 3-6 months back in order to detect patterns. You can have some fairly clever bad people out there. They can continually make sure their IP is changing, their user agent is changing, and so on, but you can still detect patterns of usage, right down to even, 5-6 downloads in a day. You look at a single day, you don't think it's suspicious, but you look back across a month or 3 months and you see, hang on, that's far too regular. That's not regular human usage. People are a lot more random than that. So, having said that, of course, we can't come up with something so complicated that it can't actually be used by all of us on a daily basis or a monthly basis. If it's taking 25 hours a day to analyse your data, your daily data, you're in trouble. We've got to have something that's practical and usable. So we're looking at coming up with there'll be arbitrary rules, but there will be agreed rules, and we will all use the same rules. And I'm actually taking this forward under the aegis of the recently formed Counter Working Group on Robots, on the grounds that it's far too big a problem just for me and just for IRUS-UK, and this working group involves publishers, the Counter auditors, we've got repository developers from the DSpace world, ePrints world, and sort of quite a nice wide representative group looking at the problem. When we do eventually get to some outcomes, and we're having merry arguments at the moment about where we apply various thresholds, those outcomes will be incorporated eventually into the Counter Code of Practice to be adopted by both repositories and publishers and other vendors. And of course, position we're in will be one of the first organisations, first outfit services. IRUS-UK will be one of the first ones to adopt the new set of algorithms. It's slightly a case of telling you what I've already told you, but it's that journalistic tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So what's the great thing about IRUS-UK? Comparable standards-based measurement, consistent comprehensive statistics conforming to a global standard on the same basis as scholarly publishers, opportunities for benchmarking, and evidence base for repositories to develop policies and initiatives to support their objectives. We have a very, very active and vociferous IRUS community advisory group with a dozen members on it, and by God do we respond to their wishes and their requirements, because they let us know in no uncertain terms what they would like from the service. All right, last bit, and then we'll actually get on to something about ETDs, if you like. Cost-wise, UK HE repositories, nothing. You know, we're funded by JISC, and fingers crossed we will continue to be funded and become a core service. We hope to remain free at point of service for foreseeable future. Time-wise, to apply a plugin or patch for DSpace prints, 10 minutes. After that, how much time you spend working with IRUS-UK is entirely up to you, how much you care about usage statistics, how much time you want to spend fishing around in the portal and looking at various reports. I think the free aspect is doubly important, because if individual repositories wanted to become counter-compliant, it's not just about following the counter code of practice, filtering stuff. You also have to be audited by independent auditors on an annual basis, and that comes at a cost of several £1,000s on top of having to write your own, you know, sort of algorithms to process according to the counter rules. So we figure, you know, realistically, at least £5,000, it would be £5,000 per repository. So with 64 repositories already participating in IRUS-UK free, you can see the potential, sort of on paper saving at least, that these are standards-based usage statistics and it ain't costing you nothing. Finally, what about ETDs? Well, actually, they are a really significant part of the IRUS-UK service, because they're a significant part of institutional repositories. They represent a fifth of the items, distinct items that we know about, that we have in the IRUS database. And they represent, well, nearly a third of the downloads. So, you know, they are well used, and I think many people have anecdotal evidence to say the same, that theses get used well, but we've actually got the hard facts and figures, subject to the fact the stats are probably wrong, but you know. Okay, let me take you in. I did have this already open and prepared, but I think my British Library colleague shut me down. We've worked together before, we're always doing this sort of thing to each other. Okay, just talk amongst yourselves a minute. Honestly, I did set it up earlier to avoid this rather embarrassing moment where I stare down at the keyboard and mutter while I'm trying to get into my own portal. Right, headlines. 64 repositories, 240,000 distinct items that we know about, and since we got started, a total of over 18 million downloads. That's against a backdrop of a changing number of repositories. We began in July 2012 with 5 repositories. As I say, we're now up to 64 repositories, and you can see, you know, it's just a fantastic upward trend. This is, no, forget that, move on, I forgot what I was going to say. We have quite a number of views, but I don't really want to go through the whole portal because we're running out of time and you really only want to know about the theses bit. So let me lead you down and point you to the University of Birmingham e-papers versus e-theses repositories, who joined us at the end of September last year. You'll see that there are 3,500 theses, 1,000 articles and other things in their other repository. But look at the total downloads of theses as opposed to articles and other materials. They are really, really popular. Again, if we go a bit further down and look at the White Rose e-theses online, again, you'll see that in terms of downloads, popularity, that the theses repositories are far more popular than just general repositories. If we have a quick look at some item type stats, we map, there are dozens, hundreds of different item types in repositories, and many repositories use very, very idiosyncratic cataloguing as to the item types. So we've tried to map them to a broadly agreed set of 25 main item types. And again, theses or dissertations look, as I say, 43,000 items, over 5 million downloads, and they are literally second only to articles. They're great performers. Moving on, let me just very quickly show you. This is the sort of report that we can, that a repository can run for themselves to get stats back of their theses. And I've picked Cranfield University because Simon Bevan would never forgive me if I didn't. And for those of you that have seen counter reports, it's, you know, I mean, this is just a web page version of very familiar sort of counter report. It's very similar to a JR1 or any other standard counter report. Perhaps more interesting if you're looking to compare yourself with other universities, and we know everybody loves to do that. So you want to know, all right, how are my theses doing against, I'm in a Band 5 institution, how are my theses doing against everyone else in Band 5? Oh, actually, you see our new Cranfield is actually performing really well. This is a nice report, the RR1. You can slice and dice and do all sorts, but as we're running out of time, I'm not going to delve into it as far as I was going to. And I think I'll just show you one sort of thing, which is something we had a little play with the British Library last year. Because obviously there's theses in the repositories, there's theses at Ethos, and wouldn't it be nice if we could consolidate the downloads from the two? Well, you'll be delighted to know our little experiment showed theoretically we can. As Sarah mentioned, I think the thing we're all up against is time and resources. It's time and money. To actually find the ability to fully develop this. However, I happen to know this thesis here, again a Cranfield one for some reason, I don't know. This is one where we actually have picked up the Ethos ID. If you were to click on that link, it'll take you through to the Ethos service. Click on the URL, it'll take you through to the exact same one on Cranfield repository. Here's monthly downloads from Cranfield. Here's some daily downloads in the last 28 days from Cranfield. And just below that you can see monthly downloads from Ethos. The figures stop at the end of June 2013 because that was when we were actually having a play. And of course no service would be complete if it had both those figures and didn't actually add them together. So, I used to get so embarrassed talking about Pyrus 2 because I'd be standing there and say, look, we've managed to add two numbers together, and, get big applause, but it's not something that's happening already. It is simple, it's just, we're actually doing it, where it's not really been done before. Okay, I'm going to come out of that, and very quickly, these were my backup slides in case the internet was down. If you want to join us, get in touch. Set up, quick, painless, consistent stats. Lovely. That's me done. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a question for Paul? Please raise your hand. Wait for the microphone.
Do you have any plans to enable us to be able to select a specified subset of universities as our comparators? Because we have regional comparators that aren't in just Band 5.
Yes.
Are there other plans to do that? I know other people have asked.
We've got a huge development wish list, and that's in the wish list already. Again, it is time and development on IRUS at the moment is me. We are expanding as much as we can. One of the reasons JISC likes us is because we're so cheap. But of course, being so cheap, that means most of the development work is me. There's another guy at Mimus is just coming into the frame as well, so we'll have extra capacity to do more. And I'm a bit idiosyncratic about what I develop next. It'll be whoever's shouting loudest at me, or something I perceive as a quick win, or suddenly I'm interested in this particular area. Send me an email. So I'll sit accusing in my inbox, and I'll raise it up the priority in the wish list.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's fantastic work you're doing. As someone from a U.S. institution who is interested in having this service available to U.S. for U.S. repositories, I'm interested in how you said it was painless to participate, but how difficult was it to establish the service, and how many staff do you have doing the work?
Right, well, on the team altogether, I reckon there's probably 6 of us in various capacities. But I'm primarily doing all the technical development, so I'm the bottleneck. I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to say, is it publicly announced how much JISC give us each year? We're cheap, you know. I mean, we're not into 7 figures a year by a long shot. We're way down in the low 6 figures per year to run. It's not expensive, and of course that still at the moment includes paying for development. When you actually look what it costs to run a steady state service like this, if you automate the scripts, if you make everything watertight so that you hardly need any human intervention on your daily ingest and so on, you possibly could, depending on the number of repositories and the situation you're in, but you know, 5-10 minutes a day max on a steady state system. So it potentially can be very, very cheap indeed. But I think I'd almost not worry about how much it costs, given that it's pocket money compared to the sort of money that swashes around in higher education, you know, even with cuts and so on. But I think the potential benefits, one of the aspects I like is the fact that we are stridently following the same procedures as publishers for the stats that we're producing for repositories, and we're showing some enormous figures for downloads. The old argument from publishers that repositories are a nonsense, noddy little thing that they can just dismiss, that's gone now. So the only problem we've now got is publishers worrying that we might make them unnecessary. And I'm not suggesting that we should do that. I think there is a role for publishers. I think they need to work out how to redefine their business models in a changing world. Of course, they're trying to do that. And of course, we've seen Thomson take over Converis, we've seen Elsevier take over Atira, so that they're getting into the CRISs, and those CRIS systems have allied portals, which are repositories. So, you know, I think its value is in showing that IRs seriously are players in the dissemination of scholarly outputs. Producing all the stats on the same basis gives us credibility. It means anyone that pipes up and is using the same processes and following these rules, there's some credibility to the claims about the sort of downloads you're seeing, as opposed to the past, where when we first all started our institutional repositories, we were glad Google was hitting us so much, because we were able to go back to academics and say, hey, look at our fantastic download figures. At Cranfield, we actually spent 2 years before switching to the counter-based figures, explaining to our academics that the figures we were giving them at the time included all the robots. So we spent 2 years forewarning them that they would see drops. But when they understood that the lower figures they were getting were actually, as far as you can tell, were genuine use by genuine people, you know, who really wanted to do something with those research outputs, they're really happy.